So we're live. Welcome to Think and Grow Rich Daily Hangouts. I hope this is working. The Hangout seems to be really slow today, so hopefully this works. But anyway, welcome to today's Hangout. This is a daily dose of wealth consciousness, prosperity consciousness from Napoleon Hill, and adding whatever else can be relevant. So welcome to the Hangout. If you'd like to appear actually in the Hangouts and help read the books or the lecture notes, then just join our Facebook group, and I post the link there just before we go live at the same time every day, usually, unless there's any tech problems. So we've been reading from lecture notes, Your Right to Riches, that Napoleon did sometime in the 50s, which are really relevant still today, because bearing in mind, he wrote his book on the back of over 500 interviews with the world's most successful entrepreneurs of the time. So what he's talking about in the lectures is what he noticed along the ways, things he didn't put in the book, that he didn't have time to put in the book, but extra anecdotes and stories and philosophies that can really help you start to have more wealth consciousness be part of your daily life. So let's get into the book. I'm going to share the screen. And we've been reading basically about going the extra mile. And today, we're reading about smiling and how to interact with other people. So learn to smile because you feel it. Where does a smile take place first? On your lips, face, or where? In your heart, where you feel it. That's where it takes place. You don't have to be pretty. You don't have to be handsome. A smile will decorate you and embellish you no matter who you are. It will make your facial expression much more beautiful. A keen sense of justice towards all people. In other words, being just with another person, even when it's to your disadvantage to do so. What a wonderful thing that is, and how does that endear you to other people when they know very well that you're being just with them is costing you something to it. There's no particular virtue in being just with the other fellow when you're benefiting by it. Do you have any idea how many people there are that are fair and honest only when they know it's going to come back to them in one way or another? How quickly they'd be dishonest if it was profitable to them to do it. It's much too high. The next one, sincerity of purpose. Nobody likes a person who is obviously insincere in what he says and does, or she says and does, trying to be something that they're not, who's saying something that doesn't represent their inner thoughts, and you know that's true. It's not as bad as lying, but it's the first cousin to it, lacking of sincerity of purpose. If you take a person who doesn't know anything about anything except one thing, and you'll find a person that will be boresome the moment he gets out of that field. You don't have to use your imagination very much to think of somebody that you know who has their nose so close to the grindstone in some one thing that they know nothing about anything going on outside of it. They will not be as interesting a conversationalist, nor in any other way, unless they have a wide enough range of things generally to be able to talk to you about the things that interest you. You know the best way in the world to make yourself liked about other people? Talk to them about the things that interest them. That's it. Incidentally, if you talk to the other fellow about things that interest them, when you get talking about things that interest you, they will be a receptive listener, much more so. Tactfulness in speech and manner. In your speech and in your manner, you don't have to reflect by your mental attitude or by your words everything that goes on in your mind. If you do that, you'll be an open book, and everybody will be able to read you, and sometimes you'll wish they hadn't. You can always be tactful, like drivers on the road when the other fellow spins your fenders, and you know how tactful they are when they jump out and run around to see how much damage is done. Maybe 10 cents worth of paint's been knocked off, and they do $100 worth of damage, cursing one another out. One of these days, I'm going to have the experience of seeing two fellows collide on the highway, and they're going to jump out and apologize, each one claiming that it was his fault and wanting to pay the bill. When I do, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to see that one of these days. Tactfulness. You'd be surprised how much you can do with people if you're just tactful with them. Oftentimes, instead of telling people to do things or asking them to do things, it might be very tactful and helpful if you requested and asked them if they would mind doing things. I think we actually read this on the last Hangout. Okay, I think I'm going to go straight to page 22. Appropriateness of words, free from wisecracks and profanity. Napoleon never saw an age in which people indulge in so many wisecracks, slang statements, double talk, and all that sort of thing. It may seem smart to the fellow who's doing it, but it's not smart to the person who's listening. They may laugh at it, but they're not going to be impressed with a fellow who is too engaged in their wisecracks. Our English language is not the easiest thing in the world to conquer or to master, but it is a beautiful language and has a wide range of words, meanings, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to control the English language so that you can convey to the other fellow precisely what you have on your mind or what you want them to know. Controlled enthusiasm. Why control enthusiasm? Why not turn it loose and let it run wild? Because you'll get into danger and into trouble if you do. Your enthusiasm ought to be handled very much like you handle electricity. It's a very wonderful thing. It washes dishes, washes your clothes, runs the toaster, etc. It does a lot of things, but you handle it with care and you turn it on when you want it and you turn it off when you don't want it. Your enthusiasm should be handled with just as much care. You turn it on when you want it to turn on, and you can just as quickly turn it off. If you're not able to turn it off as quickly as you turn it on, somebody will come along and get you all enthused over something that ought not to be enthused over. Did you ever hear of that happening? What a sucker you'll be at that time for their play at whatever they want you to do. You can be too enthusiastic with the other person when you wear them out pulling down their metal shades and resisting you. Napoleon has had salespeople come around so enthusiastic he wouldn't let them in his place a second time because he didn't want to go through the trouble of defending himself against them. Napoleon heard some speakers and preachers like that too. He didn't want to follow them because he would have too much trouble resisting them. Now don't get any notions. You know the type he's talking about, the fellow that just absolutely turns his enthusiasm battery loose and goes off and leaves it. All you can do is run away from it or try and turn it off. The man that does that is not going to be popular, but the man who can turn on his enthusiasm at the right time, the right amount, and then turn it off at the right time will be considered to have a pleasing personality. Incidentally, if you're not able to exude enthusiasm when you want to, you're certainly not going to be considered a pleasing personality, because there are times when you definitely need it in teaching, lecturing, or speaking, ordinary conversation, in selling, or almost anything that you're doing in human relationships requires a certain amount of enthusiasm at times. It's one of those things you can cultivate. It's just like all those other qualities. There's only one quality you can't cultivate, and that's personal magnetism. You've got just so much of that, and even that is subject to control and transmutation too. But that's something one person can't give to another. And then good, clean sportsmanship. Being a sports about everything. You're not going to win all the time in life. Nobody can do that. There are going to be times when you lose, and when you lose gracefully and graciously. Lose and say, well, I lost, but maybe it's the next best thing I did because I'm going to start looking immediately for that seed of equivalent benefit. Next time when it comes to lose, I'm going to let somebody else lose. I'm going to wise myself up. During the Depression, Napoleon had 4 of his friends commit suicide. 2 of them jumped out of tall buildings, 1 shot himself, and another took poison. They lost their money. 2 of them, Napoleon lost twice as much as they did, but Napoleon didn't jump off any building, shoot himself, or poison himself. So what did he do? He said, well, this is a blessed fine thing, because losing this amount of money now, I'll have to start earning some more, and in earning some more, I'll earn some more. That was his mental attitude towards it. He started looking for that seed of equivalent benefit. He said, if I lose every penny I have, I can start in all over again. Wherever I can get a bunch of people together to listen, I'll be able to start making money. How are you going to down a person with that kind of attitude? No matter how many times they're defeated, they'll come right up again, just like a cork. You can put them underwater, and they'll bounce up the moment you take their hand off them. And if you don't take their hand off, they'll make you take it off. Common courtesy. What a marvelous thing that is. Just common, ordinary, garden variety courtesy towards everybody, especially towards people that are obviously on a lower plane socially, economically, or financially than yourself. What a wonderful thing it is to be courteous to the person to whom you don't have to be courteous. It's a wonderful thing. It does something to the other fellow, and it does something to you. Nothing got Napoleon upset quicker than to go into a restaurant and have somebody newly rich start ordering the waiter around and abusing them, even though sometimes they may deserve it, but he never learned to like that. He always thought that anybody who abuses another person in public, with or without cause, has something wrong with their machinery. Something is missing in life. When Napoleon was living at a hotel in Philadelphia, he went to get his publisher for the first time, and one of the waiters spilled some hot soup right on the back of Napoleon's neck, and it burned him too. The head waiter ran over, and in a little while the manager of the hotel was there. He wanted to get a doctor, and Napoleon said, well, it's not serious. After all, the waiter spilled a little soup. He said, we'll have your soup clean, and we'll do this, do that, etc. And Napoleon said, don't get upset. I'm the one to get upset, and I'm not getting upset about it. After he was off duty, that waiter came up to Napoleon's room and said, I want to tell you how much I appreciated what you said. You could have had me fired. I was just as good as fired. If you hadn't talked about it the way you did, I would have been out. I couldn't afford to be fired. Napoleon didn't know how much good it did the waiter, but it did Napoleon a lot of good. As far as he knew, Napoleon never intentionally in his whole life humiliated anybody for anything whatsoever. Never. He may have done it unintentionally. He felt good to have that attitude towards people, and it came back to him because people had that attitude towards him too. They didn't want to humiliate him. Why? Because you get back from people what you send out. You're a human magnet, and you're attracting to you the sum and substance of what goes on in your heart and soul. Appropriateness of personal adornment. That's important to anybody in public life. You've got to be a show person if you're going to sell yourself in any walk of life. There are certain things, if you will describe them in ordinary language, you take the history of the most outstanding man in the world, and if you just gave the barebacks and didn't dramatize as you went along, you were down flat. You've got to dramatize these things that you're talking about. You've got to learn the art of showmanship as you go along. Temperance, eating, drinking, work, play, and in thinking. Temperance, not too much, not too little of anything. You can do yourself just as much damage with eating as you can with drinking liquor. Just as much. A rule that Napoleon went by in all these things is that he didn't allow anything to take charge of him. When he was smoking, when he got to the point where the cigars were smoking him, then he quit. He could usually take a cocktail or two. If he ever found himself being able to resist them, not being able to resist them, he would part company with them in a hurry. He would follow the same rule if he ever smoked again. When he got to the point where the cigars were smoking him, he quit. He wanted to be in possession of himself all of the time. Not too much, not too little. Temperance is a marvelous thing. There's nothing so very bad in life if you don't overdo it. Patience under all circumstances. You've got to have patience in this world we're living. It is a world of competition. You're constantly being called upon to use your patience, and by using patience, you learn to time these things so that you get action out of other people when the time is more favorable. If you don't have patience and try to force the hand of other people, you'll get a no, a turn down, or a knockdown when you don't want it. Patience is required in order for you to time your relationships with people. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to be able to control yourself at all times. Most people don't have much patience. You can take the majority of people and make them mad in 2 seconds. All you've got to do is say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. Gracefulness in posture and carriage of the body. To slump around and be careless in your posture is one who is not very particular about their own personal appearance. And fourth, it's a good idea to have gracefulness in posture and carriage of the body. And there we go. That's the end of that part of the lecture notes. So I'll come back here. Okay, cool. So basically what we read about there is a whole different bunch of things. But the main one, treat other people how you would like to be treated, and, you know, treat them with kind of sincerity and with honesty, you know, so that that comes back to you. And then he talked about how to, sorry, I'm just trying to get my copy of the book back here because it seems to have gone. Oh, I closed it by accident. Yeah, and then he's talking about, and I hope that the image is working. I'm not sure why it's not for some reason. Okay, now it is. Yeah, and then he talked about making sure that your enthusiasm is controlled.